Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Lead Podcast, where it's our intention to support the development of future hospitality industry leaders. And I'm really excited to have a conversation today that we're going to bring back to guest voice. There's so much conversation in the market right now around guest experience, but how do we have practical steps for us as leaders to implement a strategy into our businesses? So let's get real about this conversation. Again, our topic today, Amy, why the guest voice should run your business. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. And I'm super excited. We have Josh Kern here, a good friend and badass in the industry. He is the general manager. I'm sorry, the CEO, the general manager. That would be funny. The CEO of literally one of my top two favorite brands in the nation. It is Snooze. Biggest fan. I go to the one in Nashville. I go to the one in Laguna Niguel. You're throwing a party every morning for people to walk in the door. Some of the best food on the planet. So Josh, if you don't mind just kind of doing a little introduction, but also how you got to where you are. You went from marketing to CEO, and all the things in the middle.
Sure. Well, I'm blushing after that introduction. So, certainly an admirer of yours, and Matt, thanks for hosting as well. But yeah, I mean, Snooze is an incredible brand, and I'm very honored to be at the helm. And it's funny you say GMs. I mean, GMs are the lifeblood of every restaurant, and so I admire them greatly. And I try and touch base with the general manager each and every day. And I'd much rather be in a restaurant with those general managers and our frontline warriors. That's really where the action takes place versus sitting in the quote unquote ivory tower that is downtown Denver right now, where it's snowing outside. But um, yeah, I was lucky enough that as I started out in kind of I actually worked on Capitol Hill when I left school, and I've always liked, being kind of in the pop culture arena, and so I liked politics. I quickly knew that you couldn't make a lot of money in that world, so I jumped into advertising, went to an advertising agency, got my first cut in restaurants in a brand called Quiznos when in its heyday. Joined when it was really, about 1,800 restaurants. It left when it crossed over 5,000. Now I think there might be 200 left. Crazy story about Quiznos and all of its adventures, and someone's got to write the definitive book of it. It won't be me, but I think there has been some time that's passed. So maybe there's some stories that are out there, but I've always been on that track. And, as eventually climbed my way to a CMO, which is, difficult to do. And, I didn't take the traditional route of being an operator. I really came, from that marketing side. And, as you start to think about kind of guests and consumer influence at that point in time, I was really thinking of that as a CMO is, how do you drive traffic? How do you build kind of the brand itself? How do you create demand? And so I was always in that realm and trying to really kind of listen to, what the guest is saying and what's happening. And now as kind of CEO, you make that transition where it's more, how do you drive consistency? How do you drive profitability? How do you fix operations? And so it's a really nice, I guess, opportunity to really use all of those insights, and then really use kind of what is out there in the restaurants and what are guests telling us, and then how you can use all the multitudes of insights that are coming at a restaurant. And nowadays, there's so many different avenues. And now, as we're going to get into a little bit later, there's a lot of filters that we can learn from, and then be able to help our restaurants, learn from that and then get it in real time and kind of move from there. So it's a fascinating time. Love restaurants, and I couldn't be more honored to represent this brand. We've turned on the spigots. We're back in development. We've signed a bunch of LOIs. We've signed 2 new leases. So we're back
For
at
those listening, they may not know what an LOI is. What is an LOI? I
yeah.
learned
So
I learned later in my career, and I was like, all these restaurant terms. What is this?
yes, I mean we put an intent to kind of on a lease to open. So we've kind of it means that we're gonna, we put a bid on a lease on a new site in a city, in and around kind of where we're at. What we're gonna do instead of going back into new markets, which Snooze was doing, we have 70 locations now. We're gonna go back and infill, and so really go after kind of markets that we are, that we're located. So we're really looking at communities like Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, back into Colorado, Arizona, and even California. And everybody says don't ever do it, but those are some of our highest, average unit volume markets out there. And so, even though it's a pain in the ass to operate in California, we're already doing it. And so, we've seen some great sites out there. And believe it or not, it's actually harder to operate in Colorado right now than it is in
Mhm.
California.
Wow.
Um, Permitting is still a mess, and politics always has rears its ugly head. So yeah, so we've got some leases out there, and we've signed two. We've got one actually; it's opening in Castle Rock, Colorado. And we actually outbid one of our competitors out there, and so that's always a
Congrats.
knock when we're the smaller one out there. And so when you kind of go toe to toe against the big guys out there, that's always nice. And then we've got one coming into Pflugerville, which is just outside of Austin. So those ones are coming online, and hopefully we've got some new news to
I love that development. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Congrats.
super psyched, really.
Yeah.
One thing, Jess, that came up, and I just want to highlight, we had a lead event in Kansas City recently, and one thing that was shared from the leaders at the front of the room, Karen and Robin, is how they reached out earlier in their careers to learn some of these terms, to learn infill, to learn, consistency and profitability as a
White space, all the things. Yeah.
just all these things. So if you're watching this now, it's just a great opportunity to listen to what Josh said and to take some of those questions back and start to ask those curious questions so you can infill your own leadership development. It's an opportunity because it's something we all have to we have the opportunity to step in should you take it. And I believe people in your organization or around you and in our network or our network on LinkedIn that'll support you in your education. But there's so much to take away just in that first few minutes. But one thing I want to come back to is just guest voice. And I love how you've kind of framed it and languaged it. How has guest voice evolved for you, Josh, over your career in the different non-traditional roles to leading to CEO of the group now?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I guess, early on, the guest voice helped shape that kind of marketing message and campaigns and brand positioning, and all of that is extremely, it's usually really high level. And you talk about, all the kind of marketing isms that tend to be out there. And sometimes marketers can get a little full of themselves. I mean, there's a lot of spots and dots, and how you're going to kind of connect with social media, and what are your brand colors, and what are your slogans, and sometimes that gets a little bit too narrow, and that gets distilled down, and as you start to go through all those multitudes, you start listening to yourself a little bit too much. And so I've really over the years have learned that the voice of the guest needs to really look at the entire business, and that's really from operations to menu to training. Because I we can learn from what our when we're hiring, like, what are the types of questions to ask. Sometimes it's like, hey, what's your walk up song? Tells a definition of someone more than what business book have you read recently. I mean, something that's a little bit about their personalities. And so I think learning a little bit more about things like that. And so one thing that we're using now is something called it's Hey Diner. And it's a little bit and grounded about mystery shops. And mystery shops were so old school, and they were, it was something where it was always in the operator side of things. And being in the industry, I always knew what mystery shops were. And that, you'd have someone that was, you know, it was someone that would just go in there. You didn't know who this human being was, and you'd get a report card back. You'd share with the GM. But now, like with this Hey Diner, and it's got AI and all the buzzwords with it. But with this one, you can actually get, like, for us, we can identify who a snooze consumer, a guest is, and they will go into our restaurants. And so I've got someone who is much more our demo. So I've got a lower age millennial that's going in, and they may be a new parent. They may be aware of snooze. They may be a huge fan. And they're going in and they're critiquing it, and they're interacting with an AI bot. and they're looking at everything that we're asking those questions, whether it's uniforms, whether it's, how does that Benedict look? How is the server greet going? How is that wait list and they're interacting? Did they talk to you about a loyalty program? And then we're getting all of that in real time. And then we can get that information back out to those general managers. And so you could see it in a shift. You could see it in, a multitude of ways. You can see it when you're testing products now. So if we're going to test a new, upside down pineapple pancake, which we already have, but if we're seeing that in real time, it's the first time as a CEO, but the marketing team can really see, oh my gosh, it wasn't made to spec, and so no wonder the scores were down, or the server wasn't really talking about it, and so there's just so much that you can start to learn from patterns. And when you're looking at all those things, and now you can feed these into AI, so you can take Yelp, you can take Google Plus, you can take all those things, spit it into these things, have the little bots do their magic, and then you can distill it down to 4 or 5 things that, hey, Pima Crossing in Scottsdale, you got to work on your greet times, and instead of all the 11,000 things that a restaurant's got to worry about. So there's just a lot of things that you can move from insight to impact. That I think is kind of an evolution of how the guest voice, I think, is becoming more impactful these days.
And I've seen that product and I love that product. What is interesting is that it does dial down into 3 or 4 things that matter, and we all know when somebody goes to eat, you pick up your phone if you're a manager listening and we did this actually at the last lead event too, but, uh, you know, we had one of our speakers go to a recent conference and speak, and she said, you're not even listed as best burger. Like, you're not even on the first page.
Right. Yeah. And that's the
So
wasteland
are
right
you
there.
listening? Yeah, are you listening to the guest, to your point, rather than internally, we think we're fabulous, but as you do some self-reflection as an organization and stop drinking your own Kool-Aid, what do we need to do to get better? We all know the ratings in Google and Yelp and all that 4.6 and higher. If you're doing 5 million, that you can increase 3% in sales. And so I think when you're just dumbing it down and like really giving clarity on what those things are, those 2 or 3 things, do people feel great when you walk in the door? And but you've got that feedback. So how do you as a general manager, as a manager, take it and actually really make impact? And it's constantly evolving. I always tell people, you're a chief repeating officer. What you did well today is great, but you're probably going to have to hit on it next 3 or 4 or 5 months. Sometimes the support center is like, Amy, we just rolled this out. We're gonna do this. And I go, yeah, but how many new people do we have that haven't touched this or heard this before? And operators have to keep 20 balls in the air. So this is something we have to constantly remind. But when you think about managers and taking that input and acting on it, how do you advise that happens, right? Because you're leading a large team in a restaurant, they may have 30 to 60 to 100 employees, and they get that feedback, and sometimes some folks get overwhelmed, which rightfully so, but it's really kind of simplifying it, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's, the discipline tends to come in if you can identify those, if you're grounded in patterns that you're seeing from guests. And so, um, then you're making decisions that aren't based on internal opinions. And if you can
Feeling.
distill, and you can, yeah, if we're all debating here, but meanwhile, you're seeing consistent feedback on beverage execution or speed of service in specific restaurants, you don't have to debate it. You can go fix it. And so I think it's the role of leadership is to translate that feedback into, clear priorities. And so I think some of that, is leadership. But just, it's taking those patterns and then I kind of call it dead cat, right? There's no other way. If something is that way, you just got to make it as simple as humanly possible, but then back it up of what that guest was saying. So I think and you said it, repeatable patterns, and just hammering it over and over again. I think that's the best way to kind of, to learn that way for sure.
And Josh, I think we just became best friends because one of my that number one leadership lessons is identifying patterns. So the company I've owned up until last year, we did thousands of mystery shops a year. And we're not talking about mystery shops here. It's staff behavior, it's guest behavior, it's mystery shops. How do I identify consistent patterns? What are they?
Amen.
Smoke and act on it. The outliers are They need some attention sometimes. The great outlier recognition or the really big challenge. But if we can identify patterns and behaviors, we can change them. And I think it's just such an important way to reinforce that for up and coming leaders. Find the pattern, give it some attention, and change the behavior. And it could be through recognition. Like I said, it could be great. Mystery shops don't need to be bad. But I encourage many of our partners to not do them if they were going to look at the outliers, stop doing the program,
Right.
and focus on the pattern to make the change. But one thing I'd love to get some feedback on is where do you see the biggest disconnect between guest expectations and how operators are running their restaurants, their locations today? Where's the disconnect?
I mean, good question. I mean, I think it's probably, that we're still, I mean, I have the luxury of I've been here just over 6 months. So I think, seeing some things here with, I guess, fresh eyes, um, is the slowness is to process and slower to act on things. And I think taking what we just talked about, and you were mentioning the patterns, but taking some of that real time feedback and then make real time adjustments. And sometimes when you're, I don't know, let's talk. I mean, you could say uniforms are out of standard, and if a general manager is not sending someone home, or simply acknowledging that there's a problem and not dealing with it, then you're basically acknowledging it's okay to do something. But if you're not taking course, if you're not correcting things and you're just acknowledging, then the problem just perpetuates itself. So if you're slow to action and you just kind of, if guests are telling you something and you're just not doing anything about it, and you just put it away in a project list, and it's there's this pattern that's sitting there, and it's the top two things, and you don't do anything, and it just, you begin to put it in that, project list, and it just goes anywhere. So I think it's that disconnect is, I think everybody's moving so quickly. But if there are things that are flashing red, do something about it. I mean, and I'm not saying like, and I think you hit the nail on the head, man. I mean, you can't do everything at one time, right? It's the old adage, if you can't eat the elephant, you got to do one bite at a time. But if there are things that guests are telling you, and you've got that great, kind of insight, there are things you can tick off that list pretty easily, because, those patterns, they're not going to be 18 things. There's probably three or four, and there's probably one and two, and you can probably tick those off fairly easy. And I guarantee the GMs know about it, but no one ever gave them the tools or the help, or they gave them 15 other things to prioritize because it was on their bonus checklist, or, something else that was out there that they had to go achieve, or, there was a new process or new procedure, a point of sale system that came in, or a new, HR policy that was coming in. So I think we just tend to overload, a new widget, a new gadget, you name it. And again, that was something that the guest was not telling any of us. We just thought it was something new that we got to put in the restaurants. And shame on us for, not having that gatekeeper, that air traffic controller, to make sure that, hey, let's not put the burden on the restaurants. Let's again listen to what's going to make us, most profitable at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it's on the CEO and the leadership along with the general managers in the restaurants kind of block the noise. Understand there's a million things that have to get done, but what are the top 3 priorities? I literally just asked my team this today. I'm like, "What are the top 3? We're not gonna get together in person this quarter, but what does that look like, and are we all on the same page?" I think the general managers or the AGMs, anyone can do it on the leadership team, but making sure that everybody's focused on those things, and that should be, one is always developing your bench, making sure you're succession planning, but the other one is listening to the guests, right? And so, when they're walking in the door, whatever tool you have in your organization. And if you don't have one, you also can just simply put it into AI and it will tell you on ChatGPT how your business is doing, what your Google rating, Yelp. There's a new belly that the new generations are using, where it now you put it in, you take pictures of your food, you put it in, and then it prompts where you should eat next. It's
Yeah,
really coming along where the Google rating is going to
yeah.
be removed at
It's
some
amazing. Yeah.
so we all have to pay attention to these things. And so, doing a lot of homework on belly and just understanding how that's going to function is going to change the way the other, the different generations eat and dine out. And so I think paying attention to all of these is important. And also, one of the things that I think sometimes people move away from that I think is a lost art are manager table engagement visits.
Sure.
And it's something that I have always loved about Snooze because it doesn't matter where I'm eating. There's always been a manager that comes by and it like warms my heart. And they're like, how are your red velvet pancakes? Or like, don't touch my pineapple ones. Those are literally my favorite. But like, how are your pineapple upside down and they're not it's not just like a I always call them drive-bys, like, you're not just driving by, they're very engaging. So, the hospitality that you guys have is great, and I think that that's where the guests come back because the snoozes that I've been into, even the ones in Denver, they're very community feel like, there's a community vibe and feel like that's your snooze and your community, and so, I think for the people that are listening is like, if you're a general manager, a manager, or a shift leader, or a captain, or a server, how do you create that connection with the guests so that the output, the Google rating, the belly, all that's already done. That's your scorecard. And I think that that's really important. And then how do you go back and listen and act to your point, Josh? So how do you do that so well at Snooze? Because I think that that is where you guys are thriving.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, we're very fortunate that we have a legion of fans that certainly come into the restaurants, and so there is that strong sense of community. So there's that natural affinity to to make those table touches. So it's surprising. It's not something that is born or is on a checklist that is forced to go around. And so I think by nature of just how the brand was born, it's just kind of part of its DNA is that kind of friendliness, that openness, that sense of community. So that's been a natural extension. And so trying to maintain that as the brand scales is certainly something because I certainly see it in Colorado and Arizona, but as we go further out, you do tend to see those gaps. And so you're right. I mean, you got to hold on to what that brand means, and that's the hardest part of any restaurant challenge, right? Is how
How'd
do
you
you
scale? Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
scale that out? And I just came from J. Alexander's, and you talk about that tree that comes from Hillstone and Houston's, and then that polished casual world and that regimen of training. And that finer touch of hospitality. I mean, I'm trying to bring some of that right into Snooze of just that refined level of hospitality. And not, we're a completely different concept, and we're talking about breakfast and brunch, and it's a different attitude and spirit. But that notion of hospitality, and the quote from the bear of every second counts. I mean, all those things are so important. And filling a cup of coffee goes a long way, and just making sure that people are enjoying these times. But at the same time, like, we've got to turn tables, and so how do you gently take the snooze culture of chilling and enjoying your time, but then you got to get the fuck out of there because I got to turn some tables. But you got to be gentle about it. So how do you coach your teams that at the same time, hey, we're a for-profit enterprise, and Saturdays and Sundays we're very fortunate that we have demand. We just we've got to turn those tables a little bit faster. Now Monday through Friday, it's a different strategy, and we've got a lot of things we're cooking on that. But we need to turn some tables faster. So that's the thing that you gotta watch in terms of culture and time. But I agree with you that the more that a manager or the extra wink and a nod, and we have something called the pickle, where it's built in, where you can, you can award someone a free pancake, just spontaneously. It doesn't have to be a birthday. It could be, if a kiddo is crying, if it looks like it's, someone's happy or someone's down or whatever, it's something that just is natural and be authentic. I mean, that's the other thing about brands. It's just be authentic and don't be fake. And that's really what we're trying to always convey at
I
Snooze.
love the authenticity. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you both a question as we get closer to the end of the episode, and one that you both shared, and not in the direct language, just about speed. And I admire this about both of you, right? So you're able to process information and act on it. And I think when I was a younger leader, that I would freeze sometimes or overanalyze or look to collect too much information. How do you act quickly? So to have the trust in yourself to act quickly. And then just if you want to come back to guest voice, what's one thing to a leader sitting inside the four walls of the restaurant right now who has, they can access their Google reviews or has a mystery shop program? What's the one step that they should really take with their team to bring awareness around guest voice or guest experience? If you could give them one action step. A little bit about speed, a little bit about action.
I think that with speed, it is almost with speed, but to slow down, and it's to distill down those one or two things. I mean, I am that's the one thing that I have to remind myself here is like I am always like, feel like there's got to be 10,000 things going on and I want to move faster, faster, faster. But then you have to remember that you do have to get a sense of reality and what really matters at the end of the day. And so I think it is just distilling those things that what are those priorities and what's going to make a difference. And then I do try to remind myself of what we had talked about earlier, of those paths. Like what is it really that's going to make that difference? Is it you know a new software program and you got to install, and this is what the vendor set said, and this is what the team went after, or is it just do we have to do this because it just makes sense? And so I think that's one thing that I try to remind the team and myself in particular. And then it's just being real. You have to balance that signal, the signal with judgment. And then not every comment, requires action, but those consistent patterns do. Sometimes you're going to get a false signal that's just out there, and it might be, I don't know, your mimosas are terrible, and then are you starting to go down that proverbial rabbit hole, and then you're like, well, wait, it was really, one thing. And sometimes operators hear what they fear. Sorry, Amy, but like that's just something where you do start to go off in that different direction. You might be missing something that's right there in front.
Yeah.
Letter. Only anything to share from your perspective on speed and action?
I think I'm a big I'm a big bring the team along and ask them, and I think that that goes with making the right decisions when it comes to speed, and you have to think fast and you have to make decisions for the organization. So, I'm a big probably questions person, as you know, and I'll ask a few questions to make sure that we are getting the insights from the end user. I think there's too many people making decisions and, in the sky in the office versus going to the field and tell me what's working, what's not, because they know better than you do. They know, and so then you can make decisions pretty quick because you've gotten the intel and you've done the homework. The other thing is experience, and a lot of the people listening right now are gaining experience, and so through experience and through 30 plus years in the industry, probably have experienced most things that'll happen in a restaurant, and so you've learned along the way, and so I think trusting folks that have some experience is good too, while you're balancing it out with pinging the emerging leaders in the field. So and I think just showing up authentically. I'm not gonna make the same decisions Matt and Josh would, but it doesn't mean I won't call you and say, "Here's the problem. What advice? What would you do?" And, I do think having humility and being vulnerable and asking people things. I pick up the phone a lot with people, and I'm just like, "Here's the situation. What do you think?" Because some people have done it before, and so I think it's important for people to I just had this conversation with a general manager last night, and I said, "You" and with the regional directors today. I said, "You guys only know what you know. So your region's only gonna know what you know.
Yep.
So if you guys aren't sitting in on each other's regional calls and you're not spending time in the field with one another, you're actually doing yourself a disservice. You have to grow." And so when I was a GM, I would see somebody at the top of the scorecard. I'd book my own flight and I'd hang out with them for a day. And I'm like, what are you doing that I'm not doing? Because my plan is to beat your ass. Like, I'm going to beat you on results. I'm going to be best in class. And so it's not a negative competition. It's a great competition. And so how are you helping the business thrive and doing it well? So there's so much in that question, Matt. It's a great question. And that could be a whole nother podcast. So
Yeah, exactly. And I would add, I guess this is a kind of a close. Like I have never, I've never seen it, and I don't know if it's a post-COVID thing, which is probably it's getting too far away from COVID anyway. But it seems like in this era right now, there's so much openness that like I can to Amy's point, I could call someone at El Pollo Loco and get some insights there, or I could call, and it's not people that I've worked with, or we go to these conferences. There's so many people that you can whatever email. you can send on LinkedIn, you can call. If there's so many people that are willing to just to talk to you, and I think that this is such a great forum. And you had Jack Gibbons on. I mean, he'll take anybody's call, and I would encourage any future leader, myself included, Amy, Matt. I mean, anyone that I think that you'll find that anyone will answer any question and will give you career advice. I don't think anyone is put out anymore in terms of talking to just about anybody. We all will find, the time. It's not, I think for whatever reason, like, society has just kind of shifted in that direction versus when I was kind of, coming up, it seemed harder to kind of knock on a door or talk to someone about advice or insights. So, and I think maybe restaurants might be a little bit different than other industries, but I would urge anyone to, to take when you get that opportunity or just cold call someone, you're going to find to be fairly receptive. It might take one or two chances or knocks at that door, but I think you'll find people be much more receptive today than any other time, and take advantage of that. And man, you know, I was telling these guys, I saw Mike Rapoli speak just the day before yesterday. And the headline there, and it's not very sophisticated, is, man, life's way too short to do things that you don't enjoy doing. And there's so many things out there. AI is not going to shut down anything. It's just going to make us all more productive. There's so many great opportunities out there, and just seize what you want and have a lot of fun doing it. So
Love that.
that's my advice, I guess.
I love, Josh, thank you so much for what you shared today. I've got some notes in front of me you saw me writing. And one thing is patterns and priorities. And I think they link together. So we have clear priorities. There's more work to do than we can do. As a coach, I spend all my day convincing leaders to do less. So how do we have our priorities? How do we find the patterns within them to change the behaviors? Appreciate both of you sharing your experience today. And thanks for another great episode. Amy, tell us about Lead. When's our next Lead event?
We have June 11th in Dallas at Mexican Sugar. We've got a great lineup there. We have Matt, we've got Jack, we've got Karen doing financial acumen that people love. This last time, how do you help yourself retire? That people making restaurants money, make yourself money. Everyone's happy. We've got Emily Williams Knight, Dr. Emily Williams Knight, coming to speak about grit, and some big headliners. So excited to see everybody there. We keep it very reasonable and affordable. It's $40 a ticket. We do have somebody that just from Adyen that just donated 10 tickets for 10 folks to go in Dallas. So if somebody cannot afford to go, we've got some donations. So please, Phil Crawford is just a dear friend, and he has been very, very good to Lead and the partnership. So thank you, Phil, and 10 tickets on Phil. So yeah, let us know if you need to get in. It's great development.
Thank you both for another great episode.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Matt.